every relationship has value. It either teaches us what we want more of and or teaches us what we want less of. And
Yep.
so I think that those opportunities to look within and say, how do I want to be differently? It gets back to your point about being courageous and not having life, not approaching life as a victim of like, it's it's all happening out there, but rather I am the creator of what my experience is.
Hello, welcome back to Dating Rehab with Anna Morgenstern. This is episode 4, and really, really excited to have Paul Aaron Travis on. He is a sexologist. He's also like a management consultant. He's an author. He's done so many interesting things. And I don't typically talk about sex with you guys. So I thought it'd be really cool to have someone on that can kind of cover those topics because a lot of people ask about intimacy and dating. So this will be a really interesting chat today. But thank you, Paul, for coming on. I'll let you do a quick
So
intro on
glad
yourself. Tell us more about you.
Yeah. So you did mention management consulting. That was one of my many chapters. I feel like my life is a piece of art that's being created over the decades. And so I've done software engineering, I've done marketing, I've done consulting. And over the last 10 years, I've focused into relationships. And I've just written my first book, The Spark You've Been Missing. I
Can't
am
wait to read that.
excited I'm super excited to share with you ideas that come from the book and ideas that come from my practice. I got certified as a sex educator 3 years ago and have worked with couples under the umbrella of the School for Lovers and the School for Love. So those are places that I have my courses and programs and also others. If that's something that can support your audience, then fantastic. I think you said that you have a list of questions and I just love to jump in on them and then we can kind of weave in other ideas.
Yeah, I think these questions are great because they'll hit a lot of the topics that people want to hear about. And then you can kind of weave in some of your background experience. The first
And I
one,
should say just for everybody, like take this as expert ideas to consider how they fit in your life. I think that anytime we give somebody else authority over ourselves, that's not right. That we are the subject matter expert of our own lives. And so I'm happy to share ideas. And if it helps, great. If it doesn't help, then let it go.
yeah,
That's just
exactly. I feel like people kind of know the answer for themselves. They just want someone else to support or like validate what they already kind of know because sometimes you feel like you're crazy because you feel like this feels wrong, but I don't know. People are telling me, so a lot of this asking for advice is just to kind of validate what you already know and to kind of support that gut feeling that you might already have. Definitely.
and I think there's so much these days that is reaffirming from the scientific perspective what you just mentioned, like what we know in our gut, that the belly is actually like our second brain. And so much about dating and life is about soothing our own nervous system. And so, I think we'll tie into a bunch of this.
And these are all real questions I've received from my network. So the first one, this is such a common one that I hear. There is someone I've been friends with for a long time, and we got drunk the other night and hooked up. Now he's making it known he wants to date me. I really like him, but I'm not sure about the attraction. He's closer to my height and not who I would typically go for. Can attraction and that sexual interest actually grow?
Wow. Well, the first thing that I think is, what was that experience like? To what you mentioned, and I think the common thing is to look outside, but really it's inside. It's like, what do I like about this person? And one of the things that we do in the Great Dating Reset, my 8-week dating program, we've actually expanded it now moving forward to 12 weeks, but because people just needed more coaching and like work on the process. The point I was getting at is that we go through experiences. What have I appreciated about the best relationships in my life? And what have I found significantly like red flaggish about other experiences in my life? And then using that to come up with what are the experiences that I want to create next. And so in this situation, it sounds sort of like a spontaneous opportunity to consider changing the dynamic of a friendship to maybe it's a situationship, maybe it's a relationship. And that's where I think it takes intentionality and saying, like, what is it that I want to create? And how does this how does this situation match up to that?
Totally. I feel like people put too much pressure on themselves to figure things out today when you don't need to have all the answers today to live in the present moment is if you had a good experience, go with it and don't try to figure out, well, and try to make a logical response to something that you felt, an emotional thing that you felt. Sometimes we kind of go back and think, well, actually, I totally don't go for people my height, or you find reasons to say no because it's like your ego talking or something that's outside of really like your soul. It's kind of like the noise and you're worried, oh, well, people will say in our wedding photos, I'm going to be taller than you start thinking crazy things way into the future that I don't think really you need to worry about. It's really about living in the moment. And if you had a good experience and it's someone that you actually really like, then go with it. You're not agreeing to get married. You're just agreeing to spend more time and get more data. And I do think that when you really like someone's soul and you really like who they are, that attraction can grow. So I think just give yourself a chance.
I think that's right. There are a couple of things kind of ping ponging off of that. One is that my son married someone who's 2 inches taller than him, and they couldn't be happier. And as somebody who's even shorter than my son, I'm like, if people want to make that their key thing, like I think that that actually buys into the notion that we were talking about before about like what society says I should be, rather than like the thing that's really present for me in the immediate moment. And then the other thing that you mentioned about can attraction grow? I think that is a age old question. And so my two bets on that are that it can, and that it has a lot to do with not just the attraction with through the eyes and attraction through the kind of senses of the pheromones, but it's also the attraction of the gut and the trust. Because what I've learned in the last 12 years since my divorce is that safety for female identifying individuals is huge, and that male identifying individuals do not get it. They're not able to relate to how many times a woman will check for her surroundings in a parking garage, or is somebody following me? And that constant sense of like, am I being preyed upon?
Mm-hmm.
Because so many, I think one of the things I've come to learn, certainly in my sex education training, that male identifying individuals don't get is how many females have been sexually assaulted and sexually abused. And so that all comes back around to that trust. And when there is trust, then that attraction grows.
That's so true. I mean, I can't tell you how many times my husband will sneak up behind me and I'm wearing like my AirPods or something and I don't hear him. And then he'll tap me and I jump out of my skin. He's like, "What is wrong with you? Why are you so jumpy?" And I'm like, "You don't understand. As women, we are naturally jumpy. We're always kind of nervous that someone's, coming to, harm us." So it's so true. It's funny that you say that. I'm gonna play this episode for him so he can hear that from you. But I agree. It's a level of comfort and safety. So I think it's a beautiful thing when a friendship can turn romantic because you already have that amazing foundation of trust and yeah, that feeling of comfort with someone that taking it to a romantic level. I mean, I feel like that would be the best relationship.
And isn't that ironic? Because the thing that I think your friend or whoever wrote that letter is looking for is very common. And it's what, our tabloids say is like NRE, new relationship energies, like falling in love, sweeping off of my feet. And sometimes it works like that. And other times, if in a situation like this where, there is good connection as a friend and then another door opens, whether it's intentional or, getting drunk and hooking up, I think there's a disappointment. Like it's not the all brand new excitement because I already know this person. And so I think that again is something that's good to look at. What is it that I want to create? Is it the experience, or is it the getting swept off of my like a Cosmo story?
I know one of my favorite examples is I had one of my first friends when I lived in San Francisco who got engaged. She was like in her friend group, another guy in her friend group, and we always knew he had a crush on her. And he was just that guy that was always hanging around. He'd always offer to drive us home or always made sure we were good. He was just like the best. He was our like teddy bear guy friend. And one night over drinks, she was like, "Guys, I have to confess something." She's like, "We hooked up the other night." She was like, I don't know what to feel about it. Like, I don't see him that way, but like, it was good. And we're like, oh my gosh, like, what? You hooked up? We couldn't believe it. And she, kind of kept going, this casual thing. And finally, she just allowed herself to fall in love. And now they have two beautiful children. I mean, one of my most happiest married friends. And what a beautiful story to their kids that they, were friends and grew. And I always thought of that. Try to tell that to my friends too that have questions like this. Like I've seen it happen and they have great relationships. There was never any of that angst that some of my other girlfriends felt when they were dating someone and he was, non-committal. Maybe he cheated once or all the things we deal with in our 20s with, dating. And they didn't have any bad experiences in their courtship. I had a lot of girlfriends that they had to really get the guy to commit and they had to go ups and downs, like broke up and all these things, but they've had a really beautiful love story without any drama. And honestly, I feel like that's kind of what we all really actually want and need rather than going for like the high highs and low lows that we've all experienced. And I think we get conditioned to think that that's normal. Like that's the butterflies, the anxiety. It's like, no, that's really just anxiety.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
Well,
it's,
something you mentioned, plucks one of the chords for me, and that is that I think we are socialized to believe that the importance and the quality of a relationship is determined by children or by number of years. And I think that gets a lot of people stuck. Like, we've been together 10 years. I'm really not happy, but like 10 years is significant. And then there's this internal tussle. And so I think that, you know, like I have children. I love my kids. In fact, I was texting just before we got onto the Zoom here that, I'm going to go see my son Thursday night. I think that like relationships are what we put into them. And that's something that I didn't always appreciate in my 20-year marriage. I had to learn that the hard way, that it was not,
Mhm.
I wasn't putting enough in. And so now that has affected all my relationships since. And it really comes back to like you talked about the present moment and what are we experiencing rather than how are people seeing it and like how will I justify it to my mother or like there's so many voices that run around in our head that we're not really conscious of. And so I think that even just another dimension to physically getting relaxed and being able to share with somebody at a level of sensuality and sexuality. Um, one of the points that I bring up in my book, Spark You've Been Missing, is that, and this is all about the authenticity framework. And so I'll just real quickly mention it for people to kind of get a little taste test of. And that is that I have this model that's shaped like a heart, and it's all about the bringing together of authenticity, which is me sharing who I truly am with others, not like I know I am this person, but this is who I show. Like there's just so little overlap, which is very common. Like I couldn't tell who I really am. So the authenticity and then intimacy. So authenticity is outward and intimacy is inward. Who am I going to allow and how much am I going to allow somebody to really come in and be able to share with me tears and laughter and actually build that trust. So why was I bringing that up? Because I think so much we talk about, you know, yeah, am I ready for intimacy with somebody? Well, they mean sexuality. And to the degree that we can get clear on like I'm getting my intimacy needs met, truly intimacy needs closeness and trust and vulnerability through people in my life, those friends that you're talking about. Maybe it's a counselor, maybe it's, certain friend group, like we go hiking and we talk about everything under the stars, but we're not, in relationship with anybody, but we're able to communicate. I think one of the things you mentioned as we were getting ready for this call is like how common it is to want to reach out to others and say, this is what's going on for me in my sexual life. But because society doesn't condone that, because society kind of says sexuality is something that's behind closed doors, we never really get a chance to actually bounce it off of anybody except for a partner. And so then there's the dynamics of like, but you're doing this and I'm doing this. So we don't have the objective thing. And so I think that's when it can be helpful to either talk to a sexologist or a sex educator or even a sex therapist. The differences are that a sex educator, and this is all in the industry terminology, but a sex educator is talking about concepts and principles and best practices, like when do we talk about STIs, and how do we talk about safety? And then a sex therapist generally is working um, with two or more individuals on how to recondition thought processes and how to communicate. Sex educators also talk about communication. And then there's also sexual embodiment practitioners who actually work with people to release certain feelings that are tied up in our body. So just thought that might also help in terms of sharing with your audience resources, possibilities.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think people know where to find resources on these kinds of things. I certainly didn't know.
You know,
Next
go ahead.
question.
No, go to, yeah.
Next question that we got. I've been out with someone 5 times and he just isn't a good kisser. I like everything else about him. Is this something he can change? How can he learn to kiss better? And this is something I've heard a lot from people where the kissing chemistry didn't feel right. And it's, I always say, is someone a bad kisser because you don't like it? I don't know if I love that label. I think it's more of like incompatible in the kissing. Because I've definitely experienced that myself where I'm like, I have to kiss this the rest of my life. I don't know if I can handle it. But what would you say to someone, asking this kind of question?
Well, I feel like it's a great microcosm for bigger questions, right? It's like, we're driving down the road and one person brings something up and the other person either explodes or kind of goes into their cave. Like, is that something that I can live with forever? Kissing is so powerful in terms of exchange of bacteria, the body's knowing, like, is there compatibility here or not? We're not all built for everybody. I know there's, less than a dozen people on the planet that are really great, partners for me. And I think sometimes we're like, we can get along with everybody. Shouldn't we be able to? And I don't think that that's true. So coming back around to your question, I feel like it comes down to communication and really having that sense of trust about. So if this is somebody that he or she has been out with 5 times, I think that's, like, in my book, that's enough time to be having conversations about what's real and what's important. Because personally, like, I don't want to waste 2 or 3 months dating somebody to be like, yeah, just not right. Like, that's something, frankly, that in my upcoming book, Dialogue Dating, which features the dating game, like, we try to get into that, and this is experienced with my students, that we ask really probing and poignant questions up front to figure out if there is a match. Maybe it's like, do you want to have children? There's sometimes that's a deal breaker. Do you want to live together? Sometimes that's a deal breaker. Like, sometimes people have been living alone enough that they're not really ready to move back in with somebody. And we're talking about, all across the age spectrum. So
Mhm.
children moving in together, etc. So coming back around, if I'm able to say, I'm really enjoying your company and I'd like to continue exploring this. And here's one of the things that would make it even better for me. It's like for us to talk about, like, show each other. Can you show me the way that you really like to kiss? And then I'll show you how I like to kiss. And to, like, trust enough that if that other person is not a good fit, then they're going to be, like, unable to handle that. And so those are the same kind of things that I would say, you know, in the bed. We talked earlier about, like, the two big things that challenge relationships are sex and money. And so if we can't talk about things that are important, then there's bigger relationship issues. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, you have to be, I guess, a little brave to have these kind of adult conversations. I think that also comes from a place of confidence too, that you kind of know what works for you and what you're looking for, but also that you're confident in the connection too. Like if you didn't like this person enough, you would just never speak to them again. But if you do feel like there's something there and it's worth seeing what can develop. And yeah, I like that. Just having them show you how they like to kiss and you show them. That feels less gives them less of an opportunity to feel defensive because it's kind of more of an open conversation and you're kind of sharing rather than saying, I don't like the way you kiss. That would make someone feel very uncomfortable, make
Yeah.
them feel,
Yeah.
yeah, I like the way you say that. And I guess, yeah, you're right. Within 5 dates, you should feel like there's some sort of rapport there where you can, you know, talk about things openly. Oh,
Well, personally, I feel like this is a question that I would have had even earlier
mm,
because, there's a couple of, and this is just, there's no formula, there's nothing that applies to everything, but I generally like to find, I kind of have three dimensions for my own relationships. It's the psychological, the intellectual connection level. It's the spiritual, emotional level, and then it's the sensual and physical level. And so that doesn't mean that people have to jump into bed, but like there's a whole heck of a lot between, going to the movies together and jumping in the sack. And so just like, how often does somebody stroke my face or, put their hand on my back and just a little rub to say I'm here and I want to be close. I want to touch. I actually had somebody say to me once, like, "How do you feel so comfortable and through touch?" And I said, "I'm really lucky. I got you know this kind of conditioning from my father. He was very, he'd scratch my head, he'd rub my back, and I noticed that when I'm driving down the road with my son or with my daughter, I'll do the same thing. I'll reach over and um, you know just share affection. And so those are the kind of things that I look for very early on in dating. And I encourage participants in my programs as well, because again, like time is short. We don't know how long we have on this planet. Why not focus those energies where there's a really good sense of compatibility as opposed to, I gotta like try to make it into something.
exactly. Are you familiar with the ick?
Mhm.
Okay. Because this is another thing where, well, say everything's going great and then you see someone, wearing Crocs or whatever, or they, they don't know how to use chopsticks, like these silly icks that people have. And then your sexual attraction for them like completely drops. Is that something is that real? Like, or are people just kind of feeding into those moments because it's like popular? Like, is that really a phenomenon people actually feel?
So my experience with that is less about that term, and it's more about what I've experienced in all the different psychology, metaphysics trainings that I've done in preparing for and developing the School for Love and my programs. And so I would say that it's more about what we believe deep down, even if we haven't brought it to to the conscious, it's somewhere down there. Like this person isn't really good enough for me. And
Mm,
then what do you know? Through that lens, our body's wisdom sees things that reaffirm what we already believe. And so, yeah, you know what? I knew that that person wasn't right because they can't hold chopsticks. If they can't hold chopsticks, they can't handle me in bed. It's like, you can be right about everything. You can also say, do I want to be right or do I want to be happy?
exactly. I know I hear some of the I mean, I would have to talk myself out of icks too, even with, like, with my husband when we're dating. Cue it, I was like, "Oh, he likes Fish, the band," and I'm like, "Ugh, like, I don't like that kinda jam music." But I was like, "Is this worth throwing away the relationship for?" No. So, yeah, I think you do have to like, I think those moments will come up for you, and you just have to kinda be like, "No, like, this is not a big enough ordeal to throw away the whole relationship," because I think a lot of people are like, "Oh, yeah, you're right." They're looking for excuses to kind of get out of it.
And your example is so perfect because it's so teeny. It's kind of like, criticizing somebody or judging the relationship based on the fact that somebody likes pineapple on their pizza. I mean, at some point, like I really have enjoyed and held strongly Tony Robbins' philosophy, which is that a good relationship needs some degree, a significant degree of compatibility or a significant degree of similarity to build that compatibility. And it also needs a significant degree of difference in order to keep that dynamic tension, because otherwise people are roommates. And
Mhm.
so, I would say like, hallelujah, you like Fish and I like, The Who, or, it's just kind of old classic rock versus, so I think that there's something where it can even be, in a healthy give and take. It's like, hey, which kind of direction are we going musically tonight? Or like, let's find music is a great example because it's not like it's a spectrum of like this or this. It's a
Mhm.
mural that keeps going and going and going. So it's like, let's try finding something new that neither of us have ever heard. And like, even back to like, how do we kiss? Like, how do we rate this? Like, we tried something new on a Monday night, and this band was a 1 for me and it was a 9 for you. It's like, okay, next Monday we'll try something different and make it a game and make it fun and be part of or incorporate part of the play into the rhythm of the relationship, because then that sets, you talked about like kissing. Maybe it's like, we want to try something different when we're naked. And it's like, instead of it all being uptight, it's like, oh, well, just like we did music. I think that the most
Mhm.
healthy sexual relationships, we're talking about like how tough it is for people to actually get advice or even know where to ask for help or even just share. Like, if we walk around our life and it's all in our head, we go crazy if we don't share it.
Yeah.
And so, um, you know, there's this whole kind of practice, I think, there's a great video out there. I should probably put it on my website, called A Cup of Tea. So, sexuality as a cup of tea. I think of it as sexuality as playing on the playground. Like, we all loved being on the playground, almost everybody. We were uninhibited. We got to try new things. We got to find people that we got along with, people we didn't. And so I feel like the best sexuality is that same kind of thing. Where is there curiosity? In one of my talks, I share that like the best thing that lovers can do to be better lovers is a sense of curiosity. Like, how does this feel? How do I feel when I'm doing this? And to be safe enough and, like you said, courageous enough to talk about it, as opposed to, doing this processing. Because if we're in bed with somebody and working to connect with them and we're just running these tapes, I think that the last time I saw the statistic is like, we can have 4,000 thoughts per minute.
Mhm.
That takes away from just being grounded and being able to experience pleasure.
Yeah, I think if you tell yourself an experience is going to be bad, it's going to be bad. If you tell yourself an experience is going to be good, it'll be good. So I think that's mindset plays a lot into that as well. One other question I thought would be really good for us to talk, 'cause I experienced this when I was dating, and I hear this all the time from people. This is why do some relationships start so hot and heavy and then burn out? Clearly, he was attracted to me the first month and then he slowly disappeared. Did you stop being attracted to me? Like those first few months when it's like they're love bombing you or they're doing their own thing, it feels like so good, like they're talking about the future. And then after that first couple months, all of a sudden they're breadcrumbing you. You don't hear from them as much. And you feel like, oh, is it me? They're not attracted to me anymore. We really internalize it. Reality, I think it says more about that person than about you. But what do you say to someone that feels like what happened to that attraction? I guess.
Well, I think that, like the other questions, it's hard to know all the details. So I can't diagnose that with that much information. But I'd say there's a couple of different things going on. One is that, back to that NRE, the new relationship energy, some people thrive on that. And then when it doesn't feel new and it doesn't feel exciting, I think that there's typically more on a male identifying individual about conquest, that we are historically or biologically trained to procreate. And even though, like, I'd like to say our minds are able to be more powerful than that, I still think that, biological urges play in. And so that's why I think it's really important to have these significant conversations up front, as opposed to just kind of like, where's this going to go? Because that kind of relationship could have come about just because of conquest and fun and new. The other
Hmm.
thing is, like, it's never one sided. And so I think it's entirely possible that the person who wrote this letter, it being pursued. So like, they they kind of want that to be forever. And the other person's like, well, I showed some initiative, but like at some point it's got to come back to me, or else like I'm doing all the work. And
Hmm.
so, those, I think, those very different dynamics I don't know which is more relevant here, but I think it's worth, for your listeners asking, like, what matters here and what am I willing to talk about, as opposed to just kind of stepping back and being like, okay, that's what happened. That was a movie. And I'm either going to keep pushing play on the movie, or, they ghosted me. So I'm just like going to take a victim stance, as opposed to
Mhm.
like, what would I like to do better? And in the School for Love, we talk about every relationship has value. It either teaches us what we want more of, and or teaches us what we want less of. And so I think that those opportunities to look within and say, how do I want to be differently? Gets back to your point about being courageous and not approaching life as a victim of like, it's, it's all happening out there, but rather I am the creator of what my experience is.
Mhm. I love that because I think so many of us take the victim approach in dating where things just happen to us and we have had no autonomy in our own dating lives. But, it does take two to tango. And if you are attracting someone that's love bombing you, well, why are you seeking that kind of validation from someone? There's always two sides to it that you can see, like, what did I do on my end that attracted this kind of dynamic? And if you, especially if you see patterns in your life, which a lot of us do, it's knowing the part that you play in it is so important. Once you have that information and you can kind of spot those red flags early on, then you're not going to spend another 3 months doing the same pattern again and again and again. And you can walk away much more confidently and sooner rather than just wait to be broken up with because you know how this pattern will play and you're just kind of playing your part in it. So totally agree on that. And the next question I think is good. You talked about it a little bit, but she wrote, at an event or party, how can I make it known that I like someone? As a woman, I don't want to seem too forward. Are there subtle things I can do to show interest, but let him be the one to make the first move? I hear this a lot too, where, men, there's like you said, there's a conquest. There is a bit of like, men don't necessarily need to be chased. I don't think that women should be the one chasing. I do think they're the beginning, I do think the man should show interest. And if you want the dynamic to be that you're going to get courted, unless you're the woman that wants to do the courting for the man, I think the dynamic, it should be the man showing the best, that initial spark interest and to do the, asking them out and kind of starting the process. I know it's a little bit old school, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I was going to ask you, so where do you think that idea comes from?
I do think it's biological where men are more the hunters. I mean, also, if you think of, if like Kabbalah concepts or, the yin and yang. As women, we're supposed to be the receivers, we're the vessel. As men, they're supposed to be the givers. And so if you think of it that way, the masculine and feminine energy depends what kind of dynamic you want in the relationship. I think there's plenty of women that love to be in the masculine. But that being said, we're not all 100% one thing or the other. We go back and forth into the roles. But if you're predominantly leading with your masculine energy, especially when it comes to dating, then the men that you're going to be attracting are comfortable being more in their feminine. So I think it could work either way, but most women say they want to lead in the feminine and want the man to be in the masculine. And so that's why they kind of want to be more that receiver. But it's tough. It's tough, especially in New York where I live, where women are, they have their MBAs, they're making good money. It's tough for them to kind of take that step back. And so I think that's why they're saying, like, at an event, how to stay in the feminine to attract more of that masculine.
Yeah. I think that there's so much in there. We could probably do a whole talk just,
Yeah.
I've spent a whole another hour on that. But I think that, it is challenging for, regardless of one's identity, sexual identity and genitals, like it is challenging to be out there and work really hard and, take no prisoners in business or whatever. And, uh, and then like be able to be soft in the bedroom and be receiving and be nurturing. So I think it actually, like, one of the fascinating things that I did not appreciate over the 13, 14-year journey, but in my sex education training, was to really understand the homology of our bodies. And that, because that word is not common, it's
Yes, I
that
don't know that.
so homo being same and ology being of the body. So our bodies are way more similar than they are different. It turns out that every penis grows from a clitoris. It's a fascinating idea. It's the same kind of thing as, testes and ovaries. Like, it's the same stuff, and it's switched on and grows and performs in different ways based on hormones. and the hormones are secreted. Anyway, the point that I'm coming back to is that we all have need. It's something I think female identifying individuals have a really hard time realizing, that there's a very common thought of like they just want sex. And the truth is they want sex and they want to feel cared about. And so there's an attachment there, or an association between sexuality and being cared about, that is not unlike women who want to be appreciated and loved. And then sexuality comes along with that. And so back to your point, I feel like so rather than more philosophy, like the thing that I think has been the healthiest, and I think I got this from a Human Awareness International course, and that was to be able to say to somebody, like, maybe you walk up to the hors d'oeuvre bar, or, there's a quiet area that's not, pumping jams, and to be able to say, I noticed you have a really nice, outfit on, or I really like your hat, or something. And, I'd love to, you know, get to know you better. Like that is not hitting on somebody. That's just sort of dropping a little truism. I find you interesting. Could even just be those words. I find you interesting, and let it see where that goes. Because the other person might be like, I've already got enough love in my life. Thank you very much. Or the other person might be, it had never occurred to me to approach you, but now that you are sharing some openness to meeting, like, yeah, let's step over there and have a chat. Or would you like to dance? Or, that there's, again, it's back to that whole idea of like a cup of tea, just making an offer without any attachment to something's going to happen or it's going to go too far, that I'm in control. And I'm just saying, you know, I I liked your look, or we could just keep going. But I hope that helps in
Mhm.
terms of giving somebody some clarity about a different way to do it. Because otherwise, like you said, I don't think most people walk around thinking victim, but I think there is a very common approach to like life is happening and I'm just watching it. But
Mhm.
as we embrace the idea of we're co creating our life all the time. And it's either with the universe, or it's with another individual, it's with my family members. What do I want to experience? And so, that uh, trying to come back around to not being too forward, not
Mhm.
seeming, I think there's this idea of like if I let somebody know I'm interested, then I'm somehow desperate. That's not true. It's just I have love in my heart and I'm interested in sharing it. Maybe you're a good person to share it with, maybe not. We'll only know by trying.
Yeah, exactly. I do feel like the intention behind anything you do and say, if it's purely just your curiosity, you're just trying to make someone smile, you're not trying to get something from someone. That's why I like the cheesy pickup lines, or being like, "Oh, you know what time it is?" I don't know, things are like kind of cheesy like that. I feel like are a bit of an eye roll. But if you really, I mean, you're right. No one hates a compliment. So even saying, like, even if you go to like, wow, like you have really good energy. Like I really wanted to meet you. Just saying even something simple like that, who doesn't wanna hear they have good energy? And, just saying, "Hi, like, my name is Anna. I just noticed, like, you have really good energy. I just wanted to say hi." Uh, there's something that I used to do back in my 20s that worked like a charm every time,
Let's
especially
hear
if
it.
we're in a bit of a crowded bar type place or party. If my girlfriend said, "Oh, that guy over there is cute," I would purposely bump her into him, and she'd bump into him, and she'd be like, "Ugh." I was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so clumsy." I was like, "Oh, it's my friend, Jenny." She it's like, "Don't," it's like, "That was my fault, don't blame it on her. I'm the clumsy one." It's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go get
Yeah.
another drink," and then I'll leave them talking. And you know what? It always worked. They were almost like perfect. They're chit-chatting, exchanging numbers. 'Cause I play like I'm the silly, stupid one, and she's just the one that rolls her eyes. Yeah, so I feel like we gotta bring the bump back.
Nice.
Another little trick that I was always done and that I've told, um, it can work with men or women, but if you go to, like, a happy hour, and it's a place where a lot of people go after work, so they have a company credit card down. I think it's better if it's kind of that kind of energy. There's coworkers. And say you're going at 5 o'clock, and you tell your friend that to meet you at 5:15, but you go at 5. And you're going there by yourself for 15 minutes, which is not, it feels long, but it's not that long. Find a group of people that look like they're having a good time. Money's down on your company credit card. And especially if you're a woman, there's a group of guys, just go up to them and be like, "Oh my gosh, my friend is always late. Is there any way you guys could keep me company until she gets here?" And you know what they do? They're like, "Yeah, of course, have a drink. We work at whatever bank or whatever." And, it's less pressure and it's cute. And then your friend eventually will show up. So if the guys aren't for you, you can be like, "Thank you so much for keeping company. We're gonna go over here." Or if it's going great, she can join. I just feel like that's like a cute, little way to get a way
That's
in.
great, Anna. Yeah, I love that.
I think that if you're just, like, cute and a little bit vulnerable, then people just wanna. Although I've been telling a lot of people this trick, so I feel like maybe they're catching on, but, hopefully not. I know we're gonna close out here in a sec, but
Yeah.
just, like, tell us a little bit more about, about you, how to find you, where people can get your books, and anywhere else you want people to get in touch with you.
Yeah. So, I mean, schoolforlove.com and schoolforlovers.com are the two main places to find me. I have social feeds, but, the more practical things are my courses. And as I mentioned, the book, The Spark You've Been Missing, Unmask Disconnection and Deepen Relationships using the Authenticity Framework that I mentioned. And we have courses going on, the Great Dating Reset. There's a course called Reground and Rebound for men going through midlife transition. And then, as I mentioned, I've got another book coming out, the Dialogue Dating. Dialogue Dating is also the dating dialogue game. So,
You're staying very busy. Amazing. Well, I'm sure there's a lot of people that didn't know there were resources for this stuff. So I'm really excited to share that with my network, and I'll make sure I'll link all your stuff in there in the show notes and all of that. But thank you so much. We'll definitely have to do another chat because I want to talk more about the masculine and feminine energy. I feel like we would have a
love
really
to.
interesting chat on that.
Well, I mean, the fact that you had specific questions from people in your network was great to dive into, and it was great meeting and exploring. And I would love to continue the conversation.
Perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Bye bye, everybody.